and welcome to this week's episode of Not D&D, brought to you by EM World. I'm your host, Jessica, and this week we have Nora joining us, who's here to talk about Despair and Dilemma, the upcoming game. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hi. I'm really excited to talk to you about everything. I'm hoping you're having a good day.
Yeah, it's so far so good. We are pre-recording this week, so sadly we can't take any live questions, but we will put links in the show notes. If you do have any questions about the campaign, you can get in touch with Nora after and send any messages about it. And also that link will also take you to the pre-launch page for the game, which is going live. When are you actually going to launch the crowdfunding? Sorry.
So we're, as a part of Pocketopia, it's the new backer kit campaign. There's a bunch of projects launching, mostly TTRPG projects, but there's a good few card games and board games. That's all launching together. I think there's about 40-something campaigns on the 13th of March. Technically the 14th for us, but 13th over most of the world.
Fabulous. Well, we'll put the link there in the show notes. So if you are listening to the podcast or watching, you can click through that to get the information there and get in touch. But Nora, before we start talking about Despair and Dilemma, which is why you're here, and I'm very excited to talk to you about it. But first, I'd like to be nosy, talk about you, your background, your history and relationship with games. So the classic first question is, do you remember the first tabletop role-playing game that you played?
I actually do have a very interesting answer to this.
Oh, good.
So I actually got my start doing tabletop role-playing games, doing role-playing first things first, online.
Okay.
So RP groups, that sort of thing. But where I started doing tabletop role playing is this is maybe the cringiest and scariest thing to say, but doing Homestuck fan comics.
Okay.
So I was doing that, and that's where I learned a lot of those core skills I learned as a someone eventually who would become a GM, and mostly a GM for most of my early RPG career. I started by doing that, making adventures with little rules, doing little art bits, and having about 8 or 6 people who would comment in, here's what we want to do next, and then I would follow up in online forums.
Okay.
After that, with those, I ended up starting by before I actually got the chance to get to D&D, we grew up fairly poor, so buying an actual book was fairly difficult. So I would do a lot of, I would call it kids play D&D, if that makes sense, in the sense of not knowing any of the actual rules, not having any of the book to reference, literally just talking to my siblings and saying, hey, here's the setting. You guys are in a spaceship, or you're in a tavern or whatever. What do you guys want to do? And then I'll make it up. Sort of like a lot of classic war games, in that sense of just have a referee who just makes it up in that way. Yeah. And then eventually, as we get into a bit better of a situation financially, I'm wanting to get into it. I want to get into RPGs. I have a lot of fun with this. So I end up convincing my parents to buy me a TTRPG. They get me D&D because it's the only one on shelves here. I did that for a couple of years, and then eventually start expanding into the wider space. Yeah.
Wonderful. I mean, so it sounds like it was like playing pretend in a structured sense. So it makes total sense to me that you didn't stay on Dungeons and Dragons, seeming as you started homebrewing, started creating. So how did you go from somebody that was running games, exploring them, to somebody that's creating games?
So the answer to that does come admittedly from D&D, because when I got into D&D, I had problems with it. There were things that I wanted to do that I couldn't do. And before I knew about the fuller TTRPG space, my immediate inclination, I think as many people have when they're young and they don't know what they're doing, is I can fix this. Yeah. So you start, I got really into the DMs Guild while that was a really big thing, making a lot of content and adventures. I'm also always been someone who likes to make things. That's the exciting part for me. I like to see things from a systems level. That's really exciting. This is more to do with my previous campaign. For example, we did Perfect Draw beforehand, which is like a card game anime TTRPG. And in that, and the reason why, part of the reason I was able to get into that space was because, I was always playing card games. I was always getting interested in how are these made mechanically. I've been listening to game design content podcasts, YouTube videos, GDC talks, etc. since I was maybe 13.
Uh-huh.
And then from there, as you know, I'm getting into I'm making content for D&D for a while. And then I start to realize, as like, you know, from there, I'm able to realize, oh, there are other systems. I think the first one that really gets me out is, you know, Monty Cook, as someone who was already in the D&D space originally, starts making his own things. A couple of those content creators mention him. And I'm able to go like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then, as I historically have tended to do, I went into a complete deep dive sometime around when I was 16. Learned as much as I could, and then went from there. I think there are a lot of TTRPGs that haven't been made. There's a lot of things that I love that don't exist. The first one that was the you know, the starting element was Perfect Draw. There is not a TTRPG that lets me do Yu-Gi-Oh!
Sure.
And I wanted to make a TTRPG that lets me do Yu-Gi-Oh! So I wanted to solve that problem. And in this case, you know, there's not a TTRPG that I think lets me do a death game series in your Danganronpa style specifically. There is O'Connell's death game that I think is pretty good for like your Squid Gamey or Battle Royale ones. That's a whole other discussion, actually. I really like the book. I'll have to talk about it more another time. But you know, I want to solve those problems because I want to be able to play those sorts of games.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. So what you want doesn't exist, so you're going to be the person to make it. Sounds perfect. So that leads pretty nicely to segue into talking about despair and dilemma. So not and dilemma, despair dilemma. Sorry, no and in there. Could you give us an introduction to what the game is? So if this is people's first time hearing about it, how can we introduce them?
It would be very funny, actually, if it was Despair and Dilemma, because then it would literally be D&D.
Yeah. I think that's where I accidentally slipped into on the Not D&D show, so I apologize.
So the pitch for Despair Dilemma, in short, is so people have tried historically to make death game. You know, death game as a genre. You know, Squid Game most recently got very, very popular.
Yes.
Stories where people are facing life or death situations and sort of have to argue or make themselves or win or fight to keep themselves alive with a small cast or larger cast of people who are also trying to do that in these sorts of scenarios. The problem with these games historically has sort of been that trying to do them sort of fights against TTRPGs as a concept, at least in a traditional sense. You know, characters dying sucks. It's really hard to kill a character and then have to make a new one, or otherwise you know who the main characters are and a lot of the mystery and tension gets lost. Or you know, if you know who someone else in the party is, then you know that they're not going to be the one to kill you. You're not going to have the mystery. Or you know that everyone who is involved is going to be the important ones. Those role play group sort of things, but then eventually someone has to leave, and that sucks when you're trying to have fun with friends. So what we've done instead is, instead of putting you in direct control of the characters, you take control of the masterminds or the narrative forces. So you still make a bunch of characters. Everyone makes like maybe 2 to 3 to fill out the game itself. But then you take control of a force like the Massacre's Edge or the Detective's Will or the Witch's Spell. And these all have different goals. The Massacre's Edge wants as many people as they can to die. The Detective's Will, the Detective's Trial wants to make sure that the detective, a special character you get to make, gets to like solve the murder mysteries, and you gets to solve the murders, and you get to answer the mysteries. The Witch's Spell wants to turn a bunch of characters into believers and rebuke skeptics so they can do otherwise impossible things. You, by taking control of those forces, then you play that throughout the whole game. You get to make these sorts of stories of whether that's like stories of people successfully getting out and finding hope, or falling into everyone just dies and they're fucked, and there's nothing they could do about it. That's up to you and everyone else, and you'll be against the other people at the table to achieve your goals when they want to achieve theirs.
Fantastic. So we're playing the bad guys. We're not playing good people.
You can play as good people, I will note. So this is the important thing. Some plot books are very like, you're a bad guy. Other ones are very specifically, you're the good guy.
Okay.
And ideally, you want to have a balance of those between your groups so that you have those conflicts of your goals coming up.
Okay.
So there's the people's hope, for example. That's a good guy one.
Mhm.
There's the mob's will. That's a bunch of people who want to survive and control what's going on. There's the detective as well. The detective's on the good guy's side.
Mhm. Okay, that's true. That's true. Okay, fair enough. But we are doing, the theme is very much death
Yes.
games, like you say, the references you mentioned, like Squid Games and things like that. So how do we approach like safety and themes, lines and veils in the game?
So at the very start of if you download the demo kit, I think you have a link to that in the description.
Yep.
You can see in the demo kit on the first page is a list of content warnings that we would consider generic content warnings.
Mhm.
This is stuff that we know are mentioned in the book,
Mhm.
are likely to come up during a game, or are otherwise just important to air out there. And we would generally recommend, if you notice one of those that is, might be harmful to you or someone else at the table, mention those. We also, at the start of the session, we do recommend, despite this being a GM-less game, everyone's taking a bit of a GM role. We do recommend that at least one person sort of host the opening.
Yeah.
In the sense of, you're the person who can print out the resources, but also you're the person who can say, hey, let's talk through this.
Mhm.
Do any of these cause problems? Is there anything else you want to veil over?
Mhm.
If something comes up, then because this is an open-ended game, you are allowed to at any point just bring it up and say, hey, please, let's not do this. And then we explicitly say that, because even if there is stuff that mechanically you need to get done, because this is a bit of a competitive game, in that sense, it's a one-shot game where you're trying to ostensibly get your goal, sometimes at the problem of everyone else's. One of the core systems we have built in is players will take control, when they are role-playing, when they are saying what's happening in the story, you can role play it out directly, or you can just go to describing. And when you move to the describing mode, instead of saying, instead of being in character, instead of giving the details, you can just say, this happened.
Yeah.
And that way you don't have to, if this is something that's like, I'm in the demo kit, we have a character who's a child, for example, and something bad could happen to them if the things happened in that way. So if that was something that someone at the table found harmful, then we could sequence it out. We don't have to see anything that happened, and we can always assume that something good happened instead.
Yeah, okay. The camera can pan away and we're left to our minds, yeah.
And then in the post-credit scene, we can see a beautiful moment where they're just reconciling with their father that traumatized them or some stuff.
Okay. Okay, great. So I get the theme. I get what we're doing. Of course, we'll need safety tools for this game because we'll be dealing with those things. So we've dealt with that. We're going to sit down and play a game, like you mentioned. Maybe I've decided it's a GM-less game, but I'm going to host. What do I need to have, like, resources in front of me, and how do we get started?
So one of the advantages we have is that right now, obviously, when the campaign happens, you'll have the full book, and we'll have a printables resource with everything you can do to get started. But right now, for the demo kit, you just need to download the demo kit, download the printables file, ideally print out the printables, or you can play on Tabletop Simulator. We have we commissioned a Tabletop Simulator demo that you can just start playing with. It's really well made. I don't remember exactly who we commissioned from. Oh yeah, Vari is who we commissioned from. They did fantastic work. I would highly recommend it. You can just get started right away if you're playing online. Otherwise, print out some resources. You can do it with just some paper and write out the details if everyone's got access to the PDF. That's not too hard. But once you've done that, the next step is just getting everyone at the table, asking them to select what plot book do you want to play. We have the 4 in the demo kit. I believe they are The Massacre's Edge, The Detective's Trial, The Traitor's, I've forgotten what the Traitor's Sabotage, and The Challenger's Inevitability. You each pick one of those. You all have pre-made characters already made out so that you can just get started as soon as you have everything made up. You place them in, and then you can start with chapter 1.
Perfect. Okay, sounds nice and easy. Options for in-person and online. Okay, so I know that having read through the game, the the quick start anyway, the structure of play is in kind of 3 phases: the prologue, the narrative, and the epilogue. So maybe if we just like can kind of talk through that, and we can get a feel for what running a game's like. So what happens in the prologue?
Okay, so in the prologue, this is your time to set up the story before it starts happening.
Okay.
We want to introduce characters. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone has the chance now to make their characters and set things up.
Mm-hmm.
We get to introduce the locations, the spaces that matter in this game. We get to introduce and we get to answer a couple of key questions that change how the game is starting up. Every plot book has their own specific question, and then they also have a list of optional questions on the setting sheet. And this allows you to, fill in a couple of things like, is there something weird going on? What weird thing have you noticed here? Otherwise, if you're for your plot sheet, for example, if you're a detective, you're going to ask what is something that only the detective has noticed.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the massacres, you're going to ask why do people need to kill in this game?
Mm-hmm.
If you're the traitor, you'd be asking a question like, why do we know there is a traitor here? So we can start that as an immediate piece of tension.
Mm-hmm.
Moving into once you've done all that, you've followed that and all additional instructions there. That's a pretty short phase. The meat of the game is in the narrative phase.
Okay.
The narrative phase takes up 3 chapters, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. Mm-hmm. And during each of them, we're going to go in a circular sequence around the table, starting with the player with the highest priority. Each of the plot sheets is a priority stat for each chapter. You draw a number of cards from your suit in a deck. So, during the prologue, we'll shuffle each suit together. Mm-hmm. And those will give you access to different actions. On your turn, if you are the narrator, you'll pick one character to be given the perspective marker. That player is the character you're following. You're going to use that character to perform a few actions, influencing people, making them feel bad or feel good. Give them hope, make them feel more depressed. You can move people around. Mm-hmm. You can help make them achieve, your generic skill resolution situation. You can kill them. And then each plot book also has their own special actions. Mm-hmm. Well, at some point, another player is going to take the narrative from you. They're going to grab the narrative marker from you by playing a card that matches, sort of like Snap, or by just hard taking it over by playing 2 cards. Mm-hmm. You're going to go through that until enough things have happened in the chapter that someone can finish off the chapter. Then you answer the chapter mystery. The chapter mystery was the big overlining thing that this chapter is looking to answer. Mm-hmm. This is usually something like, how is this game started? Who is the master of the mansion? What's going on with this, that, or the other? What does this key unlock? Mm-hmm. And this allows you to create truths alongside some other actions, of course. Mm-hmm. Truths are hard facts about the game world. Given that this is a GM-less system, you're not generally going to have someone who can referee that stuff. So truths sort of act as a referee. This is true in the world. You cannot fight it unless you find a way to introduce a twist or to ignore it in a way that makes sense to everyone at the table.
Okay.
You do this until you get to chapter 3. Chapter 3 is the final chapter. Usually through the previous chapters, you're going to be unlocking special abilities based on achieving your goals for each plot book. Sometimes those goals will be something like, I want to be the first person to kill someone, or I want half of everyone to be alive still. In the final chapter, your goals don't give you a special ability because there's no more game to play after this, except for the prologue. They're going to give you a question that you get to answer during the prologue. This is the final bit of narrative control you get. Mm-hmm. So the traitor, for example, they have 2 options for the final chapter. They can either be the last person alive if they achieve their goal, or they can be redeemed. If they're redeemed, they get to answer the question, how does everyone else forgive the traitor? If they are the last person surviving, they get to answer the question, what power does the traitor get as the last person surviving? How do they finish that all off? And then if you get neither, you get another question that's more negative. A little bit more, your goals have sort of fumbled and you get to answer this still, but it's in a negative sense. For the traitor, for example, you get to answer the question, how do the survivors punish the traitor for their misdeeds?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've kind of just gone off on a lot.
No.
Then you the prologue. In the prologue, you just answer those questions. You have a couple of questions you get to answer everyone else, and then you have a sort of free-form moment where if there's anything that's left open, any ropes that haven't been pulled down, any stories that haven't been finished, people can just ask each other, "Hey, I want to know what happened to this character. I want to know what happened to this storyline that we never got the chance to finish up," and then someone else can answer that.
Yeah. Fantastic. I mean, reading through it, it felt to me like it is a narrative game because people have a lot of narrative control, and we're very much telling a story together because, like you say, it's GM-less. But there is quite a lot of structure and prompts and information in that. So, how do you feel? I mean, would you agree with that interpretation? And do you think that makes it easier for newer players, or do you think this is something for more experienced RPG people?
So we've intentionally made it so that one of our target people that we know is going to be a person who wants to play this game are people who are role players, but not necessarily tabletop role players.
Yeah.
And because of that, we've decided to make the game a little bit more board gamey. We've taken a lot of inspiration from coin games. Are you familiar with coin games?
Can you give me an example?
Root is a good example. Cole Worley's Root.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Cole Worley's done a bunch of other coin games before. These are games about systemic interaction, about being different forces with different goals. And part of the goal is to take a sort of board gaming system like that and to give it a bit of a TTRPG sense to help blend those aspects of this is very gamey, but it's also giving you a lot of space that doesn't care about the mechanics at all, that you can be very role-play with.
Yeah. Exactly. It did feel like if I've never played a role-playing game, I'm not going to feel... Because, sometimes if you have a very free-form narrative game, I really enjoy those, but some people that are new to it are like, I don't know what I'm meant to be doing. I don't have like a prompt or a structure or guidance. So this kind of really gave a nice structure of like, these are like all the questions, like you were saying, you've got something to think of to come up with an answer. So it gives a really nice kind of prompt to that. That said, a lot of people that are tabletop role players will have played games, but maybe not played like a GM-less game. Do you have any kind of advice or guidance on somebody that's trying a GM-less game for the first time, if perhaps they're more used to having somebody telling them what's going on and somebody being in charge at the table?
The first thing I would say is, if you are worried about not having someone in charge, talk to everyone else at the table. If you're playing in a 4-player game, one of the really useful things is just to say, "Hey, I don't know what to do here. What do you think?" Or, "Hey, I don't know. I'm not sure how this rules interaction works," or, "I'm not sure if this is. I want to try and do something that breaks the rules a little bit." If you have 3 other people at the table, vote. Let them vote and let them decide if that makes sense. There's no reason you can't still play a little bit to the rim if everyone else at the table is having fun. This is the same as when you're playing a casual board game, for example. A lot of the time when you're playing a casual board game, often there will be a situation where you're saying, "Hey, oh shit, I forgot about this trigger. Can we go back and can we redo that?" And you have to make a little bit of that decisions on the fly. You're still allowed to do that in the TTRPG. That's okay. Play interactively with everyone else. There's a sort of collective unconscious that you'll be creating. You're trying to create a story together. Listen to what other people are saying. Ask them questions. You're playing the GM whenever you're not the narrator, effectively. You're playing the person who gets to ask and answer some of those questions of, "Hey, what do you think's going on here? Hey, what does that look like?" You get to ask those sorts of things whenever you're not having to take the narrative focus.
Okay, so you're crowdfunding the game in a few weeks next month, which is very exciting. It feels like reading through the game is quite far down in development. Like, we've got a whole quick start guide there. Has the game changed much during development? Were there any interesting different mechanic changes? Like, did you start with one thing and now it's gone completely somewhere else?
Yeah, I don't think there's a game that can survive that, especially when we're trying to do something a little bit, we're not working off of a core system. We're not making a PBTA game or anything like that, where, you've got a bit of the structure already sorted out for you that can be a little bit helpful to give you a guiding line. that's so we did have to do a lot of that. We knew from the beginning that what we wanted was to put you in the role of the controller of the game. One of the big inspiration points actually was this board game called Tragedy Looper. It's a very niche board game.
Yeah, I've not heard of it.
Yeah, it's a very niche one. I adore it. It's inspired by the works of Ryushiki 7, the creator of Higurashi and Umineko.
Okay.
It's very inspired by that, and it's a time looping game where one player takes control of the mastermind of a time loop, trying to keep the time loop going forever, and the other players take control of the people who are aware of the time loop, and then try and stop it by figuring out what's going on, stopping anyone from dying, etc. So we wanted to have that sort of tension in the game, where you had different goals. You were trying to achieve it. We wanted to make it a bit more coin gamey than this one was. And we wanted to make it a lot more role-play-y, where you got to answer exciting questions. You got to get your minds in the eyes of the player. But I would say the biggest change in the development of it was the introduction of the perspective marker and the perspective. So the big problem we were trying to solve is we originally just had a rotation system. Players would take one turn doing one action or two actions or two half actions and a full action or whatever. We went through a lot of different options. And this caused a lot of problems where you would basically get to do very little. You would say, oh, I guess this guy's going to move. Oh, and now it's your turn. And now you're going to do this thing. We have moments where, okay, I guess to let you have control, you'd have a weird counterspell war, where you would say, okay, I'm going to move this guy. Well, I'm trying to achieve this, so I'm going to have to stop you. And then basically nothing would happen in a chapter because everyone would be focused on stopping everyone else. So what we eventually found was, to get a whole story, we need to take inspiration from the structure of a visual novel, which is where a lot of this genre lives. And that is to say, you are having scenes that follow a character doing a couple of things, talking with a couple of characters, dealing with a couple of problems. So one character is going to put a perspective marker down on a person. A couple of play sheets can do different things in weird ways. Challenges can put them on a location because that starts a challenge, for example. But you're going to try and solve the problem. You're going to put the perspective marker down on a character, and then you're going to follow that character. You're going to role play that character doing a scene, doing a little bit of an action. I'm going to take I'm the detective, so I'm going to take the detective. I'm going to move them to where the corpse is. They're going to then investigate the body. I'm going to role play that out. And then I want to, because what we've discovered in the body, since I want this character's morale to be higher, I'm then going to have that, what I investigated, be convenient, create a convenient truth that's useful for me, and also justifies me then raising that character's morale. And then another player will take that eventually, or you will pass it to another player at some point, and then we start another scene, like in a visual novel or in a TV show, where we're following different scenes, and then eventually we reach the culmination of the chapter.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, that was an interesting change. I'm glad you said about the perspective markers. I think it's always interesting seeing how a game develops, because sometimes you play test something very early on and it feels so different to where it is at the end. Is it fair to say you're near the end of development? Is it kind of ready to go? Or
so we have all of the text done. We have everything in the book written up. I work as the primary game designer and the marketing and formatting person. I have graphic design experience, so I do the formatting in the book.
Yeah.
My partner is the editor and a lot of the writer. She writes up a lot of the silly text. We have one of the really fun things she got to write up. So for the book, because we're doing a death gamey thing, very DanganRonpa inspired, we have a shitty little mascot guy. So in the book, they have a lot of silly little cut-ins. So she's writing up a lot of those right now. But we've written up all of the gameplay text. We've been through a significant amount of playtesting. We've been playtesting pretty hard on for about 6 months. We have a great playtesting community, which is great. Since Perfect Draw, our previous project, did so well, we've got a big Discord community of people who are very excited to playtest some of these projects. We've been able to do that. We've done some anonymous playtesting. We expect there's probably going to still be a little bit more. Nothing breaks scrutiny once you meet everyone else. So once we've finished the campaign, we're still working on it. We're still doing playtesting. Once the campaign finishes, we will be giving access to the prototype PDF to all the backers. And this way, if there is any immediate problems, and this allows us to finish up any of the layout stuff during this time, you get the access to it immediately while we finish the layout, while we get any stretch goals done, and so forth. But if there's any problems that people notice, hey, this doesn't quite make sense, I didn't quite understand this, we get a quick chance to fix that up.
Yeah.
Consider it like a post-game patch in a video game sense.
That makes sense. That's a good analogy for it. You mentioned as well some stretch goals. Do we have any sneak previews of what any of those would be? Are you ready to share any?
We've got a lot of them locked down. I'm still having to figure out what order everything's in.
Okay.
I can say this. One of the main really exciting things we have for stretch goals is I've been able to get in contact with a lot of death game game creators, people who make indie RPGs, indie death games, visual novels, and
I'm so glad you clarified, not people running actual death games somewhere on the dark web. I was like, oh no.
Oh, for all we know. But people who are making things on itch or on Steam, making these sorts of content. I'm sad to say we have not been able to get any of the DanganRonpa and Zero Escape team in, at least as far as I'm aware. But we've gotten a lot of really exciting people. I think let me just get up my list and I can share a couple of them. We've gotten where is it? Sorry, I've got this up over here. Here we go. One of the really exciting ones actually is we got Laurie O'Connell, who of course did Death Game, the other TTRPG in this space. Themis is a frankly brilliant death game visual novel creator on Steam. They make some really good ones. They just released a new game. I would highly recommend checking that out. If you've played Liar Liar on itch.io, it's a small free VN that I can really recommend. That's about a bit of a classic. What if this cute girl wanted to murder people? We got her on in there. We've got Old Dog Games potentially doing something a bit later down the line. The people who did Deathmatch Island, which is also a sort of overlapping game, although a lot more in the death game in the sense of Fortnite or Fortnite or the Hunger Games. And probably our first stretch goal is going to be from Rapil, the creator of DanganRonpa Antebellum, which is a fan project that's I personally like quite a bit, and I think is a really exciting get-on for this. Those people will all be making death game sheets. Those are the setting guides. So we have 5 that we've made. These people, if we reach those stretch goals, will be making more of them, and that's the where your death game is set and the core narrative behind it. That's going to then help guide your hand a little bit. Usually what these mean is just inciting moments for each chapter.
Sounds great. Okay, well, thanks for sharing those with me. I wasn't sure if I'd get an answer, but I managed to get quite a good one. So yeah, well, that sounds really exciting. I hope the campaign goes so well when it launches on the 14th of March. You said yours is 13th?
So I believe it's the 13th, but for me it's the 14th because I'm in Australia.
Oh, because of the time zones. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Got it.
For most people it's the 13th.
Yes, okay. Got it. Okay, so 13th of March we'll be launching, and hope you can hit as many of those stretch goals as you can, but look forward to checking it out. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on and sharing Despair Dilemma with us. Not Despair and Dilemma, as I said wrong at the beginning. Just Despair Dilemma. But yeah, I hope it does really well with the crowdfunding, and best of luck to you for it. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. Before you go, though.
Oh, of course.
Because you're a person who enjoys a variety of different games, I'd love to get some recommendations for you. So do you have any recommendations for other indie tabletop RPGs?
Yeah, so I've got a couple I could probably do. Probably the first to get across is so we're as a part of the Pocketopia campaign that BackerKit is doing. There's about 40 different projects. I believe I mentioned this before that are all launching at the same time.
Yeah.
And a couple of those are really exciting. We're actually going to be doing a stream a little bit later where we at Double Summon Games have organized a showcase stream with a couple of smaller creators alongside us to showcase some of those projects that we find exciting.
Oh, nice.
TTRPGs wise, specifically, we've got Plaguebound that's joining us there. That's a project about a post-apocalyptic world where people are being shaped and changed by the post-apocalypse. That one's really exciting. And Myths and Monsters, which is a game covering specifically mythology in ways that aren't usually covered. Niche mythology in a way that's really exciting.
Cool.
That said, on a personal level, the game I've been playing the most recently has been Triangle Agency.
Oh, yeah.
Triangle Agency, if you haven't heard about it before, just in case anyone listening hasn't, it's designed as a SCP or Warehouse 13 or so forth style game where you're taking control of a small agency trying to deal with anomalous problems. I think that the game is legitimately one of the, if not the best mechanical games I've read, one of the best written. One of the core gimmicks it has is that there is a whole section at the back of the book called Playworld content. The Playworld content in this book, you are only allowed to read once you have reached a certain part in your character arc.
Okay.
Which means there's a lot of stuff that you don't get to know, so you're not getting to do like planning builds. You have to respond to what actually makes sense for your character. I've been having an extremely exciting campaign of this. The core systems of you having an anomaly that you get to work with and having these cool and wild and out there powers. I would absolutely recommend anyone who is interested in the narrative sort of TTRPG space, absolutely give this a look. It's a beautiful game as well. The graphic design and the art assets are incredible. If that's something that interests you.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the main important ones. Other than that, I'll just say read Jenna Moran. Her stuff is great.
Okay, that's some great recommendations there. So thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for coming on, Nora. It was lovely to speak to you about Despair Dilemma. And if you have any other projects in the future, please do get in touch. We'd love to have you back to hear about the next project you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a few in the pipeline. So we'll see which one of those, playtesting. We'll see which ones of those work out.
Absolutely. Let's do Despair Dilemma first, because it's not even crowdfunding yet. Let's do that one first, and then we'll move on. All right.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Nora. It was so lovely to speak to you. And thank you to everyone who's watched and listened. We'll be back next week with another indie tabletop RPG to introduce to you. But for now, that's all. So thank you very much and goodbye.
See ya.